Today we're exploring Don't Repeat History, Embrace the Mystery, which is the journey from our knowing mind to the sacred unknown. And we're all aware, we've been told, and we know this 2020, this is a history-making year. We are in the middle of making history right now. And we all have this collective history, of course, going on in our nation, in our world. We also have our personal history, right? Or her story, or their story, your story, my story. It is all story. Once it's gone into past, then it's a story told about that past. And as they say, the people who write the history books determine how we see history. So we are right now not just writing our collective history, but we're always writing our own history by the stories that we tell in our mind. And these aren't always helpful stories. And often they are unconscious. They're not stories we're aware of telling about ourselves. Old stories about, it might be about, oh, I'm not good enough, or life is such a struggle, or it's so hard, or I can never seem to get a break, or what did I do wrong? It must be my fault. Old stories that we may not be aware of. That here in Unity, we're very much focused on transforming and changing those into new stories, right? But there's a quote you're probably familiar with. It's attributed to George Santayana, that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. You probably heard some variation of that. And we may not be conscious of these stories that we're telling about our past, about our history. And they can be running us unconsciously and therefore perpetuating experiences we don't want to keep creating, right? We certainly don't want to create unconsciously. And we don't want to create based on our past and a story that we probably wrote in our mind unconsciously 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And our country right now is actually living that out. We have this unconscious history of, for example, systemic racism that a lot of us have not really been aware of, that's now coming into consciousness. Well, we have stories like that within ourselves and in our lives that we need to bring them to our awareness. We need to understand what story have we been telling so that we can have choice about whether we want to keep telling that story or not. So I want to ask you right now, what stories have you written about yourself and your life? What are you aware of? What do you see repeating as a pattern? And they could be good stories too, right? But what stories have you told about yourself and your life? And how have they limited you? Because even the good stories can limit you. And considering once you know that story, and it might take some while to unearth what are some of the stories still playing in there, to consider what story you want to tell now and what story we as a collective want to be telling about our nation, about our planet. What do we want to create from that story? And that's shifting us from what Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith, who I like to quote a lot, talks about as the 4 stages of spiritual growth. That shifts us from the first stage, which is to me, the victim consciousness. It's happening to me. And we have those old victim stories. Maybe we were, abused as a child. Maybe we had lost something. Maybe our parents died when we were young. Maybe we've had financial losses or breakups in our lives, or whatever it is, the painful times. Usually the happy times are not the problematic stories, are they? They could be. There's another thing we can talk about regarding that. But we go through experiences in our lives, and we might get stuck a little bit at that victim consciousness of it's all happening to me and why me, and then kind of blaming ourselves. But then when we start to become aware of these stories and bring them to consciousness, we can move to creating a new story, which is the second stage of by me, the manifestor consciousness, where we're more creating intentionally our life by the story that we tell. That's related to the law of attraction, right? That we create our reality by the thoughts that we think. But some of you might know that I have a little bit of a caveat with the law of attraction, because the truth is that we're not in control of everything. We're not creating everything that happens in the world, right? We didn't create the fires. Now, we might think maybe collectively the whole of the planet has for global climate change, right? Maybe that has something to do with it. But we personally did not create those fires. And so you might know someone who lost their home in the fire. There's hundreds of people who have. They didn't create that. That's not from a mistake in consciousness. That's a fire. But we could even, when we evolve to the stage of creating our reality, or creating what I like to say is our experience of reality, because we don't create the weather, we didn't create the fires, but we do create how we respond to that and our experience of what has happened. So we don't want to go into this stage of the creator or manifestor stage of consciousness and then blame ourselves when something goes wrong. Like, oh, I must have had bad, wrong thoughts to create this fire, or cancer, or this injury, or this loss in my life. That's not helpful. That's going back and beating ourselves up with another story. So life happens. We have some opportunity to create our experience of what happens in life and to contribute to that by having intention, having goals, holding positive thoughts in our mind. All of that is helpful. But sometimes life happens and we have an opportunity. Everything that happens in life is an opportunity when we choose to see it as so. And what do we want to create with that? What story do we want to tell of that? So we have the unconscious victim stories that we want to transform. We might want to rewrite the story and create new stories that are more empowering, that are more helpful, that are more healing, that are bringing our world together. But there are stages beyond those two. And that's where I'm inviting you to today. It's great to be able to create a new, better story. But it's even more powerful to step out of story altogether. To let go of story, storytelling mind, to let go of knowing, of our need to know. This is kind of a scary thing for a lot of us. Stepping into not knowing, because the knowing we've been talking about is intellectual knowing, that knowing, I know my story, I know who I am, I know what my life is about, I know what I'm doing. Knowing, it's all intellectual. It's all in our head and with our mind. And when we know, we shut the doors. We already know, there's no other possibilities, because I know. There's no opening for divine intervention. There's no opening for grace when we stick to, I know. So there's another kind of knowing that's spiritual knowing. Spiritual knowing has nothing to do with the mind. It happens in silence. It's a feeling within us that we can't really describe. It's the foundation of faith and trust, is that spiritual knowing. And that spiritual knowing is really a leap into what our mind would call the unknown. Because it's beyond our thoughts. It's beyond our intellectual limitations. Those are good. I mean, I'm not saying the mind is bad. It's helpful. It's a useful tool. But when we want to move to the third and fourth stages of spiritual evolution, we want to expand beyond just the capabilities of the mind. So the third stage of spiritual growth, according to Beckwith, is what is known as the channeler, or I like to call the flow stage. Through me. The divine is flowing through me in my life, expressing through me. It's not limited by what I know, or what my history has already been. I'm opening now to a vast river of inspiration, of possibility, infinite possibilities. And in order to do that, in order to take the leap into that next stage of through me, we need to let go of that knowing, that need to know. That's a hard one because we're really attached to knowing, aren't we? Anyone here attached to knowing? We want to know what's going on in the world. We want to know what to do with our lives. We want to know what is happening next week, next month, next year. And in fact, not knowing, that's pretty vulnerable, isn't it? I mean, were any of us shamed for not knowing as a kid? You know, did you ever have a teacher who shamed you for not knowing the answer to something? Or heaven forbid, you didn't know something, you didn't understand something, so you raise your hand, you ask a question, and you're made fun of or you're shamed by a parent, by someone else. Where in our culture in particular, not knowing is really uncomfortable. It's really scary, it's vulnerable. It makes us feel like we're kind of floundering around. So we wouldn't want to leap into that unknown, into that not knowing, if we didn't know that there was something much bigger catching us. That there's the infinite presence of the divine that knows everything that we need to know. It knows everything that we need to know. And we can utilize our intellect in a helpful way, but know when to surrender that. To know when to let that go, to open to something much greater, to open to something that we couldn't have conceived of because our limited, I know, it's only so much. There's only so much that we know, right? I mean, you don't know everything in Wikipedia, do you? I don't. Scientists don't know everything, right? They're constantly exploring. So there's that third stage of through me. But that's also still a little bit holding on to control. We like our control, don't we? We do. We feel safer when we're in control. Right? And it's still a little bit ego, right? I'm going to allow it to flow through me. It's a little tricky there, isn't it? I mean, it's okay. Our egos are lovely. We need egos to survive on the planet. We need a sense of me and I and mine to be able to get along, but the ego should be the servant of the divine, of our divine self, our true self, not the master. Ideally, I don't like to use the word should, but ideally, our ego, our sense of self, our personality is the servant of something much, much greater, much bigger than us. This is how the greatest ideas of all time and the greatest discoveries of all time have shown up, because they've come through from something beyond what we already knew. It takes a lot of courage to step into I don't know. But that's where I'm inviting you today. Because the fourth level or stage of spiritual development is as me. It's oneness. It's oneness with the divine. That's what yoga is. Yoga means union, oneness. And in that place, we step beyond the intellectual knowing into quiet mind, open heart, into this present moment. And in that, as me, the divine and I are not separate. There's not a me and I, and then I'm letting it come through. It's all one. When we are in that, we're given what we need to know, right? When we need to know it. There's such trust in that. it's really possible to have that kind of faith and trust. And there may be times in your life where you can remember having that. You just surrendered and you trusted and you let go, and what you needed came. That's our true nature. And we can access that by allowing ourselves to step into the I don't know, the great mystery, the unknown. That's the sacred. Because it can't be known by our intellect. It can only be known by the heart, by the soul, the quiet place within us. You may be familiar with a quote by Voltaire. God, or the universe, is a circle whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. God is a circle whose center is everywhere, right there, right here, and whose circumference is nowhere. This very statement takes us out of intellectual mind, because the intellectual mind can't grok that, right? Like, it's a circle, but how can a circle possibly, that's what the mind does. Like, well, I can't get that to work out. Step out of that. Because there is no limitation to the divine. Anytime we try to limit it with our mind, and we try to describe it, and try to pin it down into this, that's not it. In fact, the yogis have a saying, neti neti tattvam asi. In Sanskrit, neti neti tattvam asi. It means not this, I am that. I am that. Some of us are familiar with the I am state. The I am, it's not even really a state. It's the divine itself. I am. It's not saying personal me is. The I am is that infinite consciousness. It's that great mystery, that vast unknown. The Lakota Sioux call it Wankantonka, the great mystery. And they don't see it as a person. Divine is not a person. It's not limited to a form. It's infinite sacred energy that is in everything. It is in the pebble. It is in the air. It is in the leaf. It's in you. It's in me. It's in the fire. There is nowhere that it is not. That I am. Tattvam asi. I am that. It's empowering to step into not knowing. Frankly, it's a relief, actually. I find it's a relief. That I don't have to always know. It's a burden to always know. It's pressure to always know. We feel scared, like we have to know, and we have to prove to people that we know. When we can step into the not knowing and let God know, let the divine know, let that infinite source of knowing take care of me and take care of whatever I need to know. To me, that's just a relief. It's a surrender. It's a surrender that leads to serenity. This is not the I don't know of, well, I don't know, it's a cop-out. I don't know, so I'm not going to deal with it. I don't know, so I'm going to avoid it. I don't know, so I'm going to stay in denial. It's not that kind of I don't know. It's I don't know. I'm open. I don't know. I'm present here. What is revealing itself? When you can sit down across from someone, maybe a different race from you, and say, I don't know. I don't know how to heal racism. I don't know how to fix the planet. But let's meet in that place of that infinite presence, that infinite mystery, and have a real conversation and discover together with open hearts what might be known, what might be sacred knowledge, what might be guiding us to our journey together in a new harmony, a new way of living. I think if we can have more conversations from the I don't know. I know that our politicians can't do that. They just can't do that, right? They can't go on TV and say, I'm running for president. I don't know. No one would get that, right? But we can. We can know that dropping into the I don't know, the great mystery, the sacred unknown, opens us to so much more. Just so much more. It takes trust. It takes being vulnerable. I was a little nervous about this talk because it's pretty vulnerable to talk about I don't know, to not know. But it's in that vulnerability that we find our power, that we find our truth, our real self, and that we can discover something bigger than us by allowing ourselves to be that open to that mystery. And it allows spirit to be our life, the divine to be our life, rather than us trying so hard to make our life, to create our life, to fix our life. You don't have to. Dropping into the I don't know opens you to whatever needs to be known to flow through, to infinitely expand beyond your previous limitations. And I want to share with you, I can get to, there we go. A poem that I'm sure many of you know, but I'm going to share it again because it's worth hearing again, maybe anew, by Rumi. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Wrongdoing and right doing, that's the intellectual mind. That's the knowing. See, that's wrong, that's right. We're going out beyond that mind into the field of infinite possibilities. Can you imagine what it would be like to meet there? To meet there across the political aisle, to meet there between races, to meet there between us and the planet, other nations, to meet there with ourselves. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. When we lie down, that's vulnerable, yes? Lying down is the most vulnerable thing you can do. In that grass, in that field of infinite possibility, of divine consciousness, of course, it's too full to talk about. Why limit it with our words, with our thoughts? All of that language and ideas don't make any sense. I invite you into that field with me because there's so much more possible for you. There's so much more possible for our world in that great mystery. So let's take this within. Let your eyes close. And feel into your divine heart right now. Your divine heart, a heart that's never been tainted, that's never been hurt. Your divine heart, your infinite, expansive heart, your heart that is the source of unconditional love, that is beyond all ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. It is beyond ideas, it is beyond the mind. Into that vast, infinite space within you, around you, through you, as you, in everything that is. There is beauty unspeakable. There is love unlimited. There are solutions. There are no problems. Because the divine is present here in every moment. And our little problems dissolve when they meet that infinite divine presence. Here in this present moment. It doesn't mean you don't have things to deal with in your life. But tap into that infinite resource right here within you. Let that flow through you and as you. You really can let go and not know. And let that infinite peace that is beyond mind permeate every cell of your being. And it's not limited to your heart, your body, your mind. As you open to that, you find that center of the universe within you. And know that that circumference is nowhere, and it can infinitely flow through you to all life. And bring these new possibilities of love and peace, harmony, healing, and empowerment. May you release your story and embrace that divine mystery within you. Many blessings.